I always knew there was a storm coming. I just didn't expect it to be in my own bed. The moment I walked in, I saw everything. Them, tangled, sweaty, and oblivious. I could have killed him right there. But no, I had a better plan. I wanted them to suffer. Ice-cold, skin-burning, soul-freezing suffering. The hose hit him like a slap from God, and suddenly, Bubba was nothing but a naked, screaming fool running into a snowstorm. Revenge? It was just the beginning. Revenge? Wasting energy. John smiled widely, clearly feeling good after having a few drinks. So you're going to let them push you out of town without getting back at them? No one is pushing me out, my friend. This job offer has been in the works for months. It's just my luck that the timing coincided with our breakup. How cold is it outside now? 15 degrees? 10? I'll be living in the sunny south, and it looks like my new home will even be by a lake. While you're freezing up here, I'll be sitting on a dock seeing what comes next. You're difficult. I chuckled. John loved fishing but couldn't stand the cold of ice fishing. I really wished I could take him and his wife Adele with me. He was like a brother, and she was truly wonderful. At that moment, Adele arrived, ordering a glass of wine and taking off her coat. Wow, it's freezing out there. It slipped out before I could stop myself. I hope you're not too cold. She blushed and laughed. I had once jokingly complimented her, which she liked to tease me about from time to time. Usually it happened when we were out at a restaurant or somewhere social. How about her? She asked, nodding toward an attractive woman nearby. I smiled back. Not quite right for me. Still lovely, though. It was a funny ongoing joke between us. If she didn't bring it up, John usually did, just to watch me turn red. John kissed Adele and mentioned we were plotting my clever comeback. She frowned, and I laughed. You need to keep him off those websites. It gives him strange ideas. I'm not doing anything risky that could land me in trouble or cost me money. In 2 months, I'll be living the good life, and she'll still be here with, well, whoever. I chuckled again. Besides, I think I've already got my own comeback planned, don't you? The situation had turned out to be quite predictable. I returned home one afternoon and found them together. At first, I felt furious, but then I calmed down and took some pictures while they were unaware. It suddenly struck me how much Martha disliked being cold. It was lightly snowing and the temperature was low. I fetched a hose and waited near the bedroom door, ready to surprise them. Just as he announced he was about to get up, I turned the hose on him. He yelped and jumped away from Martha, clearly startled. I couldn't help but give her a splash, too. They both started yelling and moving around. He tried to find something to cover himself, but I kept spraying. Eventually, he ran outside in the snow, completely unprepared and confused. I had locked his truck so he couldn't escape that way. I stood just inside the garage, keeping the hose steady while he became more frantic. Neighbors came out to see what the commotion was. Some tried to intervene, but one retired police officer grinned and got his own hose. We took turns spraying him until the police arrived. They helped defuse the situation, and since he had been yelling threats, it worked out in my favor. Bubba ended up needing medical attention for exposure after all of it. News of the incident spread quickly throughout our small town. I stayed with my mother that night and then called Martha to tell her she needed to leave the house. She was resistant, but my mother called the authorities again, and since the house was under her name, Martha had to go. The divorce process was tough on her, and she struggled when she realized she didn't get to keep the house. In the end, I offered her the car she wanted and half of our shared belongings, meaning mostly my things. She moved into a small apartment relying on the money I gave her, trying to find work before it ran out. John laughed at the memory. Yeah, he'll never live that down. What your mom did was just priceless. Bubba became a local joke. Whenever he complained at work, his co-workers teased him about getting splashed with water. Women would giggle at him, with one even asking if he was always that way, making him furious. He tried to confront me at my mother's house, thinking he could scare me. But I had already moved back to my old home. My mom played it smart. She told him to stay put while she retrieved her hose. He foolishly waited by the door, and when she came back, she sprayed him down. By the time the police arrived, he was running after her, shouting while she was laughing at his expense. "That guy is really out of shape," she exclaimed. I was almost at the end of my walk, and he was trying to keep up. "Tammy, I bet you won't make fun of me running 5Ks again." Then the police arrived and took him into their vehicle. He asked for a blanket and for them to turn on the heat, but they didn't do anything while they talked to others involved. It felt like it took forever for them to finish getting statements, and he started to feel really cold, so they called the EMTs. They wrapped him in a warm blanket and took him to the hospital. He was treated for being too cold, and the officers made it clear that if anything like this happened again, their response would be slow. They ended up charging him with making threats, trespassing, and public intoxication. He was above the legal limit when they checked him at the hospital. It took him 3 weeks to get out of jail, and he lost his job in the process. On the bright side, he got a new nickname. Bubba was gone, and now he was called Hoser. He had brought all this on himself, and I was satisfied with how things turned out. He left town quickly, and no one knew where he went. With Hoser gone, Martha had to take care of herself and tried hard to reconnect with me. But it was too late for that. I had moved on and was settling into my new role. My mom got engaged again just a week after the divorce was final. She never liked managing her own finances. I can only imagine how upset she was when our old home was put up for sale. She tried to persuade her new partner to make an offer, but he didn't want to. Fortunately, she sold it for a good price and used that money to help me buy a house at my new address. I nearly had enough to purchase a lovely place by the lake that I had my eye on, and when all the paperwork was done, I owed less than the price of a used car. I had a plan to pay it off in 3 years. A few weeks later, I answered a knock at my door to find my mom standing there with 3 suitcases. "Bring these in. I'll be staying here until I find a new house." "What? You thought I'd stay in that cold place while you were down here enjoying the sun? Besides, you're my only child, and I don't want to be far away when grandkids come along." My grandparents had left her their home, a sizable brick house on 2 acres. She had also gotten our house in the divorce from my dad, who had vanished before he had to make any child support payments. Mom was quite resourceful with her paperwork. When they found him 4 years later, he owed a lot of money. The judge made him repay it all, adding extra costs every month, or he'd face jail time. By the time I graduated from college, he still hadn't paid off what he owed her, and she refused to forgive it. I guess my determination comes from her. When my grandmother passed away, Mom moved into that house, and I ended up with hers. I'm glad we never got around to transferring titles. Mom found a charming 2-bedroom cottage in a new neighborhood above the lake that just happened to overlook my place. I noticed her using a pair of binoculars from her porch, and she blushed when I asked about it, claiming she'd taken up birdwatching. I was still the newcomer in the community, but Mom easily fit in and learned the local gossip within a few months. She introduced me to her new friends, and through chance, I found myself meeting a nice woman who was looking for someone. Many of the gatherings were a bit awkward for all of us, but I did manage to make a couple of good friends who were easygoing. A year later, a woman came by looking for her sister. I hadn't seen the sister in months, and it turned out the family was searching for her. The woman arrived with her twin boys, who had just turned 6. At first, she gave me a doubtful look, but after a brief chat, she relaxed. I noticed the kids were very curious about the dock. "Would you like to check it out?" I asked. They took my hands, bouncing with excitement. My mom called out, "Did I give you permission to go near the water?" I looked back at her and said, "Looks like you've been outvoted. I'll keep one and you can take the other for safety. Let them explore a bit. What's the harm?" "They could slip and fall in," she replied. "We'll get them out if they do." "They can't swim yet." "Then this is the perfect chance for them to learn." I couldn't help but chuckle at her worried expression. "Don't worry. I used to be a certified lifeguard and my first aid training is up to date. Let's just make sure we don't have to use it." The boys ran up and down the dock, while she winced every time they got close to the edge. After they burned off some energy, they started noticing the little fish swimming around. I often fed them, along with the larger catfish lurking below. I had a trick where I'd take an old can of dog food, punch a few holes in it, tie some strong line to it, and drop it in the water. After a couple of days, it would be gone, and I'd simply replace it. "Look, fish," I pointed out. "Yeah, you should bring your dad with you next time so we can fish," I suggested. One of the boys looked up at me with big, sad eyes. "We don't have a dad." His tone made me think he had lost him, so I offered my sympathy. The mother scoffed. "You're mistaken if you think he's gone. He didn't die, he just left, and they haven't seen him since they were 2. Not knowing how to respond, I offered again that she could bring them along next time. Her expression made it clear that nothing significant would change, but I decided to move on. We were almost to the deck when Mom came around the corner of the house. "Hi, honey. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know you had guests," she said. I sighed, pretty sure she had seen I was with someone. "It's fine, Mom. This is Annabelle's sister. Sorry I didn't catch her name. She came looking for Annabelle. Maybe you could help by reaching out to your friends to see if anyone knows where she is. It seems she's been gone long enough to cause some concern." "I'll get right on that. It's a pleasure to meet you, dear." "Juliet, if you hear anything, I would really appreciate it," she replied. "I'll do my best, dear. And who are these young fellows?" Juliet smiled for the first time, and it turned her expression around completely. "The one on the left is Tony, and the one on the right is Mark." Mark's eyes were drawn to the platter Mom was holding. She smiled and said, "I was just bringing some cookies for my son. They never get too old for cookies. Would you like one? Maybe some lemonade?" Juliet looked a bit embarrassed and attempted to decline, but Mom insisted, "Nonsense, one cookie won't hurt. If it did, Al would have faced trouble as a teenager." I went and got the lemonade while everyone settled on the deck. Mom was on the phone, nodding and responding frequently. Juliet appeared to be in a much better mood. When Mom hung up, she was beaming. Betty spoke with Irma, who talked to Gloria, who heard from Jade that her cousin saw your sister 2 towns over at the Traveler's Rest with Joe Morgan. You know that man is married, right? This will be tough for her. Juliet broke down in tears, and Mom comforted her. Before I knew it, they were off in her minivan, leaving the kids with me. We exchanged glances for a few moments. "Want to go fishing?" They were eager to, so I grabbed a couple of lightweight rods and retrieved some worms from my worm farm, which I maintained with compost. After that, I got 2 life jackets from my boat. "There's only one of me, and I want you to be safe. This way, if you fall in, you'll pop right back up like a cork." They did their best to concentrate and succeeded pretty well. Mark even caught a 2-pound catfish. He wanted to keep it, but when I asked if he was going to clean and cook it, he decided to let it go after I took a picture. Tony felt a little left out until he caught a nice-sized crappie, and I snapped his photo as well. After an hour, they started to tire, so we cleaned up. I returned the leftover worms to their tub and went to clean up. They wanted to freshen up to get rid of the fishy smell, so I put them in my whirlpool tub and turned the jets on. They squealed and laughed while I took their clothes to the washer. They'd be clean and dry soon, as would the boys, I hoped. Their clothes were just starting to dry when they finished, so I helped them dry off a bit, and they put on a couple of my t-shirts that hung down to their knees. Once I settled them on the sofa and turned on the cartoon channel, I checked on their clothes. By the time I returned, they were cuddled up together, sound asleep. Not sure what else to do, I began preparing dinner, grilling pork chops and charring corn, one of my favorites. I also heated up some leftover baked beans. I was so focused on cooking that I didn't notice the car pull into the driveway. Juliet burst onto the deck, clearly upset, with Mom following behind, smiling. Before she could express her frustration, Mom asked what had happened. The boys woke up and rushed over to their mom, excitedly sharing stories of fishing and taking a bath in my whirlpool tub. Mom had taken their clothes inside to change them. I tried to steer the conversation away from the distress. "Did you find Annabelle?" Tears welled in her eyes. "She's using again, and that boyfriend of hers is her dealer." It became pretty intense, especially when I called his wife and told her where he was. She showed up right after us and caused a scene until the police arrived. They found drugs in the room, so Annabelle and her boyfriend were taken in, and his wife plans to use this time to get a lawyer. We'll try to raise her bail, but I'm not sure if it's possible. She didn't use drugs when I knew her. What changed? She fell in with the wrong crowd and got involved with the wrong man. He got her started, and she never looked back. Have you spoken to the district attorney? Maybe they can arrange some rehab for her. If there was a lot of drugs found, she could be facing serious charges. There was plenty of drugs in the room. They were there to meet their supplier. I noticed Mom bringing the boys toward the patio door. Here come the kids. Try to stay positive for the meal. I know cooking is the last thing on your mind right now. I lit candles to keep the mosquitoes away. The boys ate heartily, their clean shirts stained with barbecue sauce. and Mom never complained, smiling at their enthusiasm. Later, we lit a fire and roasted marshmallows together, with Mom helping Mark and Juliet assisting Tony. I smiled, imagining that people passing by would see just another happy family. Worn out again, I had to carry the boys to the car, securing them in and promising they could come back whenever their mom said it was okay. She smiled and gave both Mom and me a kiss on the cheek. As their taillights disappeared over the hill, we went back inside to brew some coffee. "She's quite lovely." "Yes, she is. The boys are adorable. They really are." "It's been tough for her since her husband disappeared." "Mom, what? Let's just focus on the good things, okay? Yes, she's lovely and the kids are great, but she has a lot of anger inside, and until she addresses that, she won't be ready to move forward. I'm not really interested in helping anyone change their ways. Maybe it's worth a try." "Then you can do it." I regretted saying that. Mom welcomed Juliet into our lives, and soon the boys were calling her Grandma. She loved their attention and couldn't get enough of it. They frequently came over to spend time on my deck, leaving me to manage things on my own. After a couple of times, I decided to make things clear. "Have fun. I have some errands and we'll be back tomorrow. Remember to lock up when you leave, okay?" I had plans with someone special. We headed to a hotel about 60 miles away, had dinner, and enjoyed the lounge scene until late. We returned to our room, where we had a fun time together. After some rest, we enjoyed more relaxed moments. In the morning, we showered and shared some gentle moments before checking out. I stopped by a nice store on the way home to buy her a new dress, as her old one had seen better days. I dropped her off with a warm goodbye and returned home. If we met again, it would be enjoyable, but I didn't expect anything deeper between us. An hour later, Mom knocked on my door. "Did you have a nice time?" "I had a great time, Mom. Thanks for asking." "Juliet seemed a bit upset when you left." "Maybe because she had to watch her kids? You took them in, not me. It's more on you than her." Mom was not pleased. "That wasn't fair. I just thought I'd encourage you a bit. She's a lovely person." "How would I know? Every time I see her, I'm busy with the kids and we hardly get to talk." "Mom, this isn't encouragement. It's pressure. Just let it be." That made her quiet, and she left soon after. 2 weeks later, I was surprised when Juliet arrived on her own. I gave her a quick hug. "Where are the boys?" "They're having a sleepover at your mom's with some friends. They set up a tent in the yard, but I bet they'll run inside at the first sound outside. I wanted to ask if you'd take me out on your boat. It would be nice to have a little relaxing time on the water unless you're busy." "Let me check my schedule. Oh, look at that. I happen to be free this afternoon and evening. I'll get the boat ready and we can pack a cooler. I won't drink while driving the boat, but I think there's a bottle of that red you like in the fridge. Grab it along with some water and snacks and we'll be all set." I had a pretty good-sized boat, not too big but powerful enough for skiing. She had the cooler ready and arrived in a nice outfit. She smiled as I noticed. "I'm going to enjoy the sun while we're out. Keep your focus on the water. I can't make any promises." I quickly changed into my shorts and grabbed a few towels. We had a fantastic time. She was more relaxed than I had ever seen her. I tried to teach her how to drive the boat, but she seemed more focused on the scenery. "You could easily pull a skier with this. I used to love that." I slowed the boat down and pulled out a pair of skis and a safety belt. She hesitated but looked eager. After a few tries, she found her footing and was having a blast. As I helped her back onto the boat, I realized her outfit had shifted slightly, but instead of being upset, she laughed it off. "That explains the attention," she chuckled as some nearby boaters cheered. Just then, a boat full of young people passed by, and one shouted to her with laughter. Instead of reacting negatively, she playfully went along with it. I hit the throttle, wanting some distance as we left their laughter behind. "So, you enjoy a little fun, huh? Are you complaining?" "Not at all. Just feel free to be yourself around me." She was about to put her outfit back on, but smiled and tossed it aside. "I'm just going to soak up some sun. Make sure I don't burn." "How do I do that?" She rolled her eyes. "You can start by helping me with sunscreen." I anchored in a quiet spot. "I can help with that." There was a small platform on the front of the boat, perfect for moments like this, completely out of sight. She laid down, ready to enjoy the sun while I prepared to assist her. We spent the day relaxing by the lake. I carefully applied sunscreen to Juliet, enjoying the warmth of the sun and the peaceful setting. We shared quiet moments, enjoying each other's company, and talked about plans for the evening. After some time on the lake, we returned to the cabin to prepare dinner. I started getting everything ready, marinating the steaks and organizing the sides while Juliet rested for a bit. Later, when my mom and the boys arrived, Juliet joined us, dressed casually and with her hair tied back. There was an easy camaraderie between everyone as we prepared dinner together. The boys helped set the table while my mom and Juliet chatted, catching up on the day. We all enjoyed a pleasant meal, filled with laughter and good food. My mom had even brought her famous banana pudding, which was a hit with everyone. After dinner, we spent some time by the fire, roasting marshmallows and telling stories. The kids were excited and full of energy, but as the evening wore on, they grew sleepy. We said our goodbyes, and my mom took the boys home, giving Juliet and me a quiet evening to relax. It was a peaceful end to a perfect day. Juliet and I had been dating for a while, and she had gradually adjusted to being with someone who treated her with respect and care. She stayed with me most weekends, and we spent a lot of time together with the boys. I had taught them how to fish, and on their birthday, we threw a big party with lots of friends and family. Juliet and my mom worked together to host the event, baking cakes and making sure everything went smoothly. As the afternoon rolled on, we gathered by the grill, enjoying burgers and hot dogs, while the kids ran around playing games. Later, we built a fire and made s'mores, a tradition that always brought smiles to everyone's faces. The evening was filled with joy, and by the time the kids were ready to go home, they were tired but happy. When my mom took the boys in for their baths, Juliet and I finally had a moment to sit and relax. We both sighed in contentment, grateful for the peaceful day we'd had. A few weeks later, we invited some friends and family for a day on the lake. My mom joined us, and to my surprise, she brought along a friend, Hiram. He seemed like a kind man, and it was clear that he cared for my mom. We spent the afternoon boating and enjoying the serene atmosphere of the lake. After docking at a small island, we had a quiet meal by the fire, everyone laughing and sharing stories. The day was filled with light-hearted fun, and we all appreciated the chance to unwind. As the sun began to set, we headed back home, content after a day well spent. The husbands were laughing, which put me at ease. You never knew when jealousy could pop up. That incident was a topic of laughter for years. I made a couple of good friends who I enjoyed fishing and golfing with. Usually their wives or girlfriends would come over and relax in the sun while keeping an eye on the children as they played. As summer came to an end, we took a few cruises to appreciate the fall colors. Jules was still just spending weekends with me, while the boys and I were hopeful that she might eventually move in for good. When I first mentioned it, she said she wasn't ready yet. Then, rumors began circulating. Mom told me she had seen Jules with the same man a few times, once at a restaurant in a nearby town and twice at local clubs. She looked worried when she shared this news with me. It might be nothing, son, but I thought you should know. Believing in seeing things for myself, I visited the clubs in our town. They weren't at any of them, but I caught sight of her car at the third one before I decided to head home. She must have arrived there later. I saw them close together on the dance floor, and it didn't look like there was much space between them. I stayed and watched for a while until they went outside. After a few minutes, I followed them out, stopping by her car. I couldn't tell if they were being serious, but the windows were foggy. I knocked on the window until he rolled it down and noticed her belongings nearby. "What do you want?" he asked. "Just wanted to say hi to Juliet. Enjoy yourselves." Her eyes widened when I spoke, but I turned and walked away, hearing a door open and a voice calling out, but I kept going to my truck. It took her 2 weeks to gather the courage to visit me, not bringing the boys. "Can I talk to you?" "Of course, come in. It's a bit chilly outside." I offered her a cup of coffee, and we sat down at the kitchen table. After a few sips, she spoke. "Want to hear about it?" "Not really, but if you need to share, feel free." I think my response surprised her. "I never promised we were exclusive." "True, but you never mentioned seeing someone else, did you?" "It's just Gary." "Well, that makes me feel better. I got tested afterward, and I'm fine." "He's fine. Why are you being rude?" "I haven't even started being rude. Do you have feelings for him?" "Yes, no, I'm not sure." Good thing I am. I won't be a backup for you, Jules. You can't see someone else during the week and then expect to spend time with me on the weekends. I wanted to take our relationship further, but that wouldn't work now. I think you should take some time away from me until you figure things out. I could never trust you again, so let's acknowledge the good times and move on. Bring the boys around when you can. They shouldn't miss out on spending time with family. She spent nearly an hour trying to convince me to change my mind before sighing, hugging me, and leaving. Mom was heartbroken. She had grown fond of the boys and called Jules a few weeks later asking to see them. Jules dropped them off but didn't stay long. Mom told me the boys were sad that I wasn't with their mom anymore and wondered if I was upset with them. Jules called me right away, and I found two happy boys climbing all over me shortly after. I assured them they were always welcome, whether or not I was with their mom, and promised we'd go fishing when it got warm again. Winter passed quietly, with only one snowfall that season. Back home, it had snowed just after Thanksgiving, and the ground stayed white until late March, which was unusual. I convinced John and Adele to visit me in February. They stayed a week, and we enjoyed a little fishing. Adele spent time with Mom while John and I played golf, and the week flew by. They talked about how much they dreaded leaving, so I proposed they move down here. I can help John find a job where I work, probably for more than he's earning now. Living costs are pretty low here, and both your parents are retired and living farther south, so you'd see them more often. You could stay with me until you settle in. Think about it. I didn't mention that I'd received a promotion and was now assistant plant manager. They promised to consider it, but I knew John wouldn't take the leap. He liked his job and had a good network of friends. Adele would have jumped at the chance. They married right after high school, 8 years ago. I wondered why they hadn't started a family yet, especially since Adele was 26 and John a bit older. I asked Mom about it a week after their visit. A look of sadness crossed her face. They can't have children, honey. John has a condition that prevents him from fathering kids. Adele wants to adopt, but he's not so sure. Why not? If it were me, I'd be all for it, especially if my partner wanted it. She shrugged. Men sometimes think differently. He might feel that every time he looks at an adopted child, it reminds him of what he can't give her. I understood that perspective. I dated regularly since I was one of the more sought-after singles in the area. While at least 3 women expressed interest in advancing our relationships, I didn't feel a strong enough connection to pursue anything further. Mom was feeling anxious. Then something happened that changed everything. I received a late-night call from a woman who was very upset and hard to understand. After a while, she managed to tell me that I needed to come quickly. John was unwell. I tried to comfort Adele over the phone, then called Mom. She joined me on the plane. Mom had always cared for John and Adele. She often referred to him as her second son and thought of Adele as the daughter she never had. We rented a car at the airport, and an hour later we arrived at their home. Adele was at the door, hugging Mom tightly and crying. I found John resting on the couch. Seeing him, I knew he didn't have much time left. He had always been a bit heavier but muscular, and now he looked small and frail. His skin had lost its color, and he was struggling to breathe. Nevertheless, he smiled when he saw me. I know I don't look good. He had been diagnosed with cancer, and it had spread quickly. He had waited too long to seek medical help, and now there were no options left except to manage his pain. The doctors had given him only a few months about 5 months ago. I sat beside him as we reminisced about our shared memories, places we had gone, friends we missed, laughing at some stories and quietly crying at others. As dawn approached, he took my hand. Look after her, okay? Promise me. I made a promise, and he seemed to relax a bit. The next day, he handed me a folder. Here's everything she'll need, insurance details, banking information, and I took care of the funeral arrangements right after I found out. Guide her, please. She won't be thinking clearly. I tried to dismiss it. We have time for that. You need to stay strong. He was in a hospital bed in the living room then, and he smiled at me. You've always been the optimist. That night, he passed away peacefully in his sleep with his wife holding his hands. He was 33 and she was 27. The days that followed were a blur. I contacted the funeral home and they sent someone to take care of arrangements. The police and coroner completed their duties, and we followed the necessary steps as best we could. I was glad to see so many people came to pay their respects. I sat beside Adele during the funeral, while her father was on her other side, and Mom was next to me. I used up all my vacation time to help her through the paperwork that follows a death. I gave a copy of the death certificate to their insurance agent, who was a friend, and she received the check within a week. Eventually, I had to return to work, and Mom promised to stay with Adele for a while. Mom stayed for 3 weeks, and when she returned home, Adele came with her. Mom said she wanted to help Adele escape the memories that haunted her. Adele seemed lost for another month before she approached me. "I need to find a job. Your mom is wonderful, but I need to be productive again. Between the insurance and selling the house, I have about $400,000, so I want to start looking for a new place." I was so happy she decided to stay nearby. I expressed my joy and she smiled back. "I would have moved here when you offered. John was the stubborn one. I couldn't face another winter there, especially alone. My company hired her on my recommendation. While we didn't work together directly, we had lunch 3 or 4 times a week. She turned out to be great at her job, improving our team's efficiency by 4%. Although that sounds small, it pleased the owners greatly. She made friends and found a small apartment. This is enough for now. I'd love to live by the lake, so maybe we could look at some places when I'm settled. I'd value your opinion." I saw her once at a club during a girls' night out. She was laughing and dancing a lot, but never accepted drinks or danced closely with anyone. Adele and John had been inseparable since she was 15, so I imagined she was still getting used to being out on the scene again. We talked about it the following Monday during lunch. "I saw you on Saturday. You were dancing up a storm." Adele blushed and smiled. "Why didn't you come say hi? I would have loved to dance with you." "I was in the pool room at a darts tournament doing well until someone from England showed up. They really knew how to play. Besides, I didn't want old memories to get in the way of new ones." Her expression became serious. "I had a fun night, but I felt guilty when I got home. You shouldn't feel that way. It has been almost a year since we lost him. You had many good years together. I'd be lucky to have someone care for me the way you cared for him, but he's gone now. You're still young and deserve to be happy. He would want that for you." "Why haven't you found someone yet? You're not unattractive, have a good job, and a nice place by the lake. I figured someone would have taken an interest in you by now." "I came close a couple of times, but it didn't work out. I believe she's out there somewhere, just hard to find right now." "Don't worry much. You'll find her when you stop looking. She might be closer than you think. If she is, she's doing a great job of hiding." We continued chatting about other topics and eventually went back to work. Winter came again, and Adele thought she might have found a new romance. He was friendly, always ready with a joke, and quite good-looking, according to Mom. Something about Trey never sat right with me, but Adele seemed happy, so I tried to chalk it up to loyalty toward my old friend. They started dating in the fall, and by February, he had moved into her apartment. She confided to Mom that she was expecting a ring soon. I wasn't thrilled, but as long as she was happy, I tried to be supportive. Then things started to go downhill. Trey lost his job and showed little interest in finding another. Adele, who had her own money, started covering his expenses. First, it was gas, then his phone bill, and soon, everything they did together was on her. One day at work, Adele seemed upset, so I asked her what was going on. She told me that Trey had said she shouldn't have lunch with me anymore, claiming it didn't look right for a woman in a committed relationship. I took a deep breath, trying to hold back what I really wanted to say. "We've been friends for 15 years, long before he came along. If you feel like you need to end our friendship, I'll accept it, but I have to tell you something. Trey doesn't seem to be pulling his weight. If he doesn't want you to have lunch with friends, he should start by contributing himself. Maybe by getting a job and spending his own money to take you to lunch." "I'm sorry, Adele, but I don't trust him. If you marry him, don't expect me at the wedding." I left before finishing my lunch, leaving her sitting there in shock. For the next few weeks, when she called to meet for lunch, I always made sure I was too busy. Every time I saw her at work, she looked like she was about to cry. Then came the snowstorm. I was sitting by the fireplace watching the snow fall outside when a car pulled into my driveway. I wondered who would be out in this weather. There was a good 3 inches on the ground. It was rare for Southerners to drive in snow, and I always stayed off the roads during storms, not because I didn't know how to drive in these conditions, but because most of my neighbors didn't. I opened the door to find Adele stepping out of her car. She was moving slowly, and as she got closer, I realized why. Her left eye was swollen, and she was holding her side as if it hurt to breathe. I quickly pulled her inside, sat her by the fire, and wrapped her in blankets. "What happened?" I asked gently. "I finally told Trey to leave. I gave him an ultimatum. Either get a job and start contributing, or we were done." He came back later with a new truck, demanding that I go to the dealership the next day to sign paperwork and make the down payment. When I refused, he got furious. She paused, taking a shaky breath. Things got out of hand, and he hit me. I managed to defend myself, but I had to leave. I immediately called a friend of mine, a police officer, and explained the situation. He told me that Adele needed to file a report as soon as the roads cleared. "She'll stay with you, right?" he asked. "Of course," I replied. "She's not going anywhere." "Good. Keep an eye out just in case. It might also be a good idea to take pictures of her injuries while they're fresh." I assured him we would follow up with the authorities once the storm passed. Trey lost control of the truck and ended up sliding toward the lake. By the time he stopped, the rear end of the truck was in the water, and no matter how much he tried, it wasn't moving. I didn't believe in guns, which my friends often joked about, and in that moment, I began to wonder if they had a point. Trey stumbled up the hill, falling several times before reaching the door. Adele had already called the police, and they advised us not to answer. We ignored his yelling and banging. When he couldn't get in through the front door, he headed to the garage and started yelling again, threatening us both. Things escalated when Trey grabbed a hammer from the garage and began banging on the door. I didn't have any weapons, but I grabbed a sturdy fishing rod, known for its strength. Adele quickly opened the door, and I swung the rod, hitting Trey on the cheek. He dropped the hammer, covering his face in pain. Adele struck him on the legs, and he stumbled back into the garage. We chased him out, and he curled up on the ground. We stopped when a police officer arrived. The officer assessed the damage to my truck and saw the other vehicle in the lake. He entered with his gun drawn and shouted for us to stop. I dropped the rod, but Adele got a few more swings in before putting hers down. The officer handcuffed Trey, who was now lying on the garage floor. The officer shook his head at Trey. "You're in a lot of trouble. You're under arrest for trespassing, property damage, attempted breaking and entering, and assault. I suggest you stay quiet until we get to the station." After taking our statements, the officer and I helped lift Trey into the back of the police vehicle. Later, I helped Adele warm up with a shower and gave her some clean clothes and a robe. She stayed over for the night, needing comfort after the ordeal. The next morning, I woke to find my mom in the kitchen, smiling until I told her what had happened. Her smile faded as she said, "I'll handle this. You just make the coffee." They stayed in the kitchen talking while I finished breakfast. I was surprised at how much Adele ate, considering everything. By the afternoon, the roads were clearer, so Mom took Adele home to collect some belongings. She would stay with us for a while until things felt safer. When they returned, both looked upset. Mom explained what had happened. He trashed her apartment, broke furniture, and threw her clothes outside in the snow. We saved what we could, but it's going to take a while to clean everything. The apartment manager is considering charging him for the damages, but Adele might not get her security deposit back. Trey had to wait until Monday to see a judge. When he did, his face went pale as they listed the charges. The truck he drove into the lake was ruined, and the dealership was now after him. Because it took 2 days for a wrecker to retrieve it, the truck was beyond repair. Even if fixed, it would have to be sold under a salvage title, which was worth much less. The dealership also had to cover the damage to my truck, adding to the list of charges. The damage to Adele's apartment amounted to several $1,000s, and the cost of her personal belongings added up to even more. On top of that, he faced serious charges for trespassing, property damage, and multiple counts of assault. When he appeared in court, the judge noticed the marks on his face and arms, asking what had happened. When told about the fishing rods, the judge struggled to contain his laughter. "Fishing rods? Well, that explains the bruises. 5 months later, when Trey went to trial, some of those marks were still visible. He couldn't afford a lawyer, so he was assigned a public defender. His best option was to take a plea deal, which reduced some charges, but he still faced several years in prison before he could even apply for parole. Additionally, the civil suits from everyone involved meant that when he was released, he'd be facing debts of over $100,000. Most of us knew we'd never see a dime, but the judgment would prevent Trey from acquiring anything on credit for a long time. Adele needed therapy to cope with the emotional aftermath of everything. It took almost a year for her to feel normal again, and during that time, she took firearm safety courses and concealed carry classes. As a result, she started carrying a firearm with her wherever she went, even purchasing special handbags that allowed her easy access to it. Her mom kept her for 6 months, and she spent a lot of time with me, often sleeping in the guest room. This arrangement usually lasted until midnight, when she would slip into bed and cuddle with me. It brought me a mix of happiness and sadness. One evening, things got a bit tricky. I had a friend over, and Adele arrived unexpectedly. By then, she had her own key and simply walked in. At the time, my friend and I were getting cozy. When Adele walked in and saw us, she shouted a greeting, took a quick look, and hurried back out. I quickly closed the door behind her. My friend gave me a puzzled look and seemed curious about why Adele had a key to my house. I explained my long history with Adele, how we had been friends since grade school, and that her husband had been my best friend. I told her how Adele ended up with a key so she would always have a safe place to go. That made her laugh. My hero! Who knew you could be so protective? If her ex didn't realize it before, he certainly does now, I added, recounting the story with a grin. Call her back. I want to meet her. It took about an hour to convince Adele to return. When she arrived, she was greeted with warm hugs and whispered secrets. I could tell they were forming a bond, and I knew I was in for a long night. They were still chatting and sharing stories when I decided to head to bed. The next morning, I woke up early, brewed coffee, and then playfully nudged my friend awake. Breakfast will be ready soon. She groaned, trying to hide under the covers, but I pulled the blanket off, admiring how cute she looked. With a soft nudge, I handed her some water and over-the-counter pain relievers. After she took the medicine, she said, "Give me a bit, I need to wake up." I spent some time sipping coffee and noticed the sound of the shower starting. When they finally joined me in the kitchen, they were dressed casually and laughing together, clearly in high spirits. They teased me while enjoying breakfast, and soon afterward, they announced plans to go out on a boat with excitement in their voices. Later, I spotted their car in my mom's driveway, wondering if they would visit her boyfriend, Hiram, who had moved in a few months back. I was curious if he would be able to handle their lively energy. A couple of hours later, they returned with big smiles. "Mom's engaged," I laughed at Adele. "Really? With that huge ring she's wearing? It's hard to miss." They rolled their eyes and began chatting about wedding arrangements. Shortly after, Mom and Hiram joined us, and we set out with hopes of a great day ahead. Hiram seemed excited but nervous about making my mother happy in their new life together. "It's wonderful to see her so happy again," I said. "You've done a great job so far." Hiram chuckled. "It's a shame your mom is tying the knot before you do. I guess I'll have to rely on my kids for grandchildren." "Wow, now I feel the pressure," I joked. Banty and Adele quickly became close friends, and I found myself feeling a little envious of their time together. They made quite a pair. Adele was tall with long blonde hair, while Banty was petite, standing at 5 feet tall with short jet-black hair adorned with diamond earrings I had given her for her birthday. I had first met Banty at a company event where she was a vendor. At first glance, I thought she was younger than she actually was, but that idea changed when I saw how confident she looked in her simple attire. It was easy to see why I found her so captivating. The image made me smile, and she smiled back. My assistant, who was a good friend of my mother, introduced us. Mom had included her in her plan to find me a partner, and I had to set boundaries from time to time, which she often crossed. She would grin and say, "You won't let me go, right? You said just yesterday I was fantastic at my job. Besides, if you did, your mother would make sure you regretted it until you brought me back. She thinks I deserve a raise, so you might want to discuss that with her. Anyway, speaking of which, young Sierra, the new hire in accounting, she's really charming. And guess what? She's single too. I bet she'd appreciate it if someone showed her around. Then set it up, just not with me. She doesn't work for me, but her boss does, so if things don't work out, it could get complicated. I won't mix personal and work matters." She sighed. "Bev warned me you were tough to persuade. Forget Sierra for now. There are lots of women here looking for someone like you." "Me?" "Yes, you. Young, professional, established in a good career with a nice house and steady income. You're also quite attractive. Overall, you make a good impression. You might lose a few points for being from up north, but I'm sure they would be happy to help you adjust. Thinking about it, I wanted to meet this charming girl. She seemed excited to see me and then asked Gladys, "Am I 23 or 24? Gladys turned a bit red, a look I found interesting. 26, but I have a good feeling about this. Alicia, which is Banty's real name, grinned at my confusion. That's how many times you've been introduced to eligible young ladies. There's a bit of a betting pool at your company about how soon you'll settle down and the details of your future kids. Wow, you all find entertainment in the strangest things." She shrugged. "It's a small town. There's not much to do. Anyway, I'm 27, never been married, have 3 brothers and 1 sister, a good job, and of course, I think I'm rather captivating." "Good to know. I'm sure you know plenty about me. Here's the quick version. I'm 34, I've been married once, and that didn't end well. I own a home by the lake, love to fish, and if we spend time together, I'll discover your charm firsthand. Peeking into your personal life, are we? And by the way, I prefer fishing in streams with a fly rod. I like to be active, not just sit and wait with a drink." "Fair enough. I find peace in sitting quietly and listening to nature. If you're a hunter, I'm more of a planner, observing my surroundings and waiting for the right moment. Then I'll have to keep an eye on you. Wouldn't want to fall into any surprises. Let's get some water and find a comfortable spot to continue this discussion." I laughed. Classic Southerner, looking for shade when it's hot and sun when it's cold. "It's just practical." I turned to speak to Gladys and found she had left. Where did Gladys go? I could picture her smirking. Probably to inform someone that they're about to be much richer. And that was the start of our connection. We chatted for another hour until she needed to leave. When I stood to say goodbye, she jumped into my arms and gave me a sweet kiss. She broke free and smiled. "Just a little taste. Are your lips tingling?" I tried to be gentle. I wouldn't want you overwhelmed on the first go. I was still trying to figure out what to say when she dashed off. I turned to see Gladys and several colleagues smiling at me. "Not a word, Gladys," I said as I walked away. I heard laughter and then saw her with her phone out, ready to share the news with my mom before I even got to my truck. Banty came by the following Wednesday. I looked up and saw her at my door. Her smile lifted my spirits. "Come on, we're going out for lunch, somewhere nice, you can afford it. Oh, and when we pass Gladys, give me a big kiss. Might as well start claiming my space." It was definitely a big kiss, and I laughed at Gladys when it was over. "I might be a little late coming back, Gladys. Please take a message if anything comes up." She mumbled, "Yes, boss," while trying to get her phone ready. Gladys? I'll be at the Honey Hog if my mother needs to reach me. Alicia was still chuckling as we walked out. Lunch turned into dinner. I took her to the nearest city since the entertainment options in our town were quite limited. I think she enjoyed the dinner theater, and we took a stroll afterward before heading home. She fit really well beside me, even with the height difference. We talked and texted frequently in the following weeks. I felt we reached a new level when she invited me for Sunday dinner, lunch to those unfamiliar with Southern terms, to meet her family. I think they liked me. Her dad had his grill going, cooking several meats. "Not worth firing up for just a couple of pieces," he remarked as I helped with the coals. I watched and learned, eager to replicate his skills later. We discussed flavors and favorite sauces. He seemed surprised that I preferred a tangy sauce over the sweeter options. After about 45 minutes of chatting, we were interrupted by a rather frustrated woman. "That's enough, Dad. Let him breathe. Mom hasn't had her turn yet." He kissed her cheek and smiled. "He's not bad, honey, for someone from up north." I wondered if that was his way of showing approval. Alicia's mother was nearly as petite as she was, but she had beautiful blonde hair. She was sweet and unassuming, but after our conversation, I had a clearer picture of her unique charm. With a warm smile, she kissed my cheek and asked me to help her husband while they prepared the food. I grabbed a couple of bear claws and started shredding while he sliced the brisket. He left the chickens alone, and when her brothers arrived, it was lively, almost like watching a nature documentary. Once everyone was satisfied, we settled into rockers and chairs on the front porch. Banty led me to the swing where she nestled close to me. We talked about everything and fishing came up. Suddenly, I learned that her family was planning to take our boat out that Saturday. My parents were going out with us the next week. Later, as I drove her home, I couldn't resist a little teasing. Our boat? Yes, you silly man. You need to get used to the idea that I'm here to stay. Do I have any say in this? Of course. Just remember to say yes, dear, often. But if you can't feel what I feel, let me know. Otherwise, we might be spending a cozy night together at your old place. I wasn't sure how it happened, but her blouse was suddenly unbuttoned. She playfully pulled my hand toward her, and I found myself caught up in the moment. It was exhilarating, and everything felt intense as she encouraged me. That's it. Just be with me. You don't ever have to ask for my time. It's yours now. The next morning, I woke her gently. Honey, I think we should get ready for the day. What you need is to stop talking, she replied playfully. After a playful exchange, we ended up enjoying a longer morning together, sharing affection and warmth, with her playfully teasing me throughout. Later, she brightened my day with a cheerful, I love you, catching herself afterward and rushing into the bathroom embarrassed. Say it again, I called after her. I didn't mean, but I playfully reminded her of her promise. She finally admitted, I love you, I'm sorry. Just remember to say it often until I feel you mean it, I replied, and she giggled through her tears. After a gentle shower together, she slipped on one of my dress shirts, and we laughed as her phone chimed again with the same message of love. The doorbell rang, and she rushed to answer it, looking cute in my oversized shirt. There stood my mom, who greeted us warmly. I'm Alicia, but most call me Banty. I'm your future daughter-in-law if your son gets smart enough to ask me, she announced confidently. Mom smiled brightly and hugged her. He's a little slow sometimes, but he usually comes around. Mom asked me to make coffee and jokingly suggested I find something to do outside for a bit. I laughed, realizing I'd been outmaneuvered, so I brewed coffee and headed out to wash the boat. While I worked, Mom came out with a smile and kissed my cheek. Don't mess this up. Banty was beaming, and before she could say anything, her phone chimed again with, I love you. I picked her up and kissed her cheek, returning the sentiment. She mentioned needing to talk to her own mom to get the family on board. We'll be at your mom's until this evening, so order takeout and we'll all meet at 6. With that, she was off, and I reflected on the happiness she brought into my life. The Chinese food arrived just after I returned, and soon after, she and her sister walked through the door, bringing even more joy and excitement into our day. Maybe we should have called you Shorty. I'm just hoping the mark on my jaw fades before I have to head to work. By the time I arrived, word had already spread. There was an email from a floor manager thanking me for being so determined. It seemed he had picked 26 in the pool. Gladys greeted me with a cheerful hug. Don't forget to tell everyone that I was the one who introduced you. When's the celebration? I'm not sure. Didn't the girls call you last night for your thoughts? I'll just show up when they let me know. She smiled brightly. We're thinking of the last weekend in June. It might be a bit warm by then, but it should be fine. Here are your messages. It dawned on me that I seemed to have lost control of my own life. It bothered me, especially with everyone pushing their plans. 2 weeks later, I found myself facing yet another round of wedding ideas from my mother, my sister, Adele, Gladys, and a few others I barely knew. They'd ask my thoughts twice, then laugh and dismiss my opinions, and I had finally had enough. I started to walk to the door. Where are you going? We're not finished yet. First, I don't know where I'm going, just away from here, and we've gotten a lot closer to being finished than you think. Alicia, where's your engagement ring? Have I ever actually said, Alicia, will you marry me? Let's clear this up. No, you don't have a ring, and no, I haven't asked. You all jumped to conclusions and just rushed ahead while I'm expected to agree. No way, not now, not ever. You all need to think about this for a few days and come back to me. Really think. Their expressions grew wide with surprise, and both Mothers and Alicia looked as if they might faint. I stepped outside only to find my path blocked by their cars. I could almost picture them feeling silly when they realized my phone was left on the coffee table. I stayed away for 4 days, calling in sick from work and using 2 vacation days before returning. It took 3 visits to the ATM to cover a new wardrobe and a couple of motel stays. I went north, thinking they wouldn't look that way. It surprised me when a state trooper pulled me over on the 3rd day to check my registration and license. Sir? Do you realize you've been reported missing? I wasn't aware of that. What am I missing? I'm an adult, have no obligations, and it's my choice where I go. My company knows since I requested vacation, and they are the only ones I owe anything to. She stepped back, seeming taken aback by my irritation, then handed my paperwork back. All right, sir. I'll cancel the missing person report. I don't know what's happening in your life, and it's not the state's business, but someone was worried enough to report you missing. It might be a good idea to reach out home, but that's up to you. Drive safely, and take care. I saw her talking on the radio as I drove off, so I turned around at the next overpass, heading back the way I came. The surprise on Gladys's face was priceless when I walked through the office doors on Wednesday. My office now. Leave your cell phone in your desk if you want to keep your job, Gladys. I watched as she took it out and put it away. She looked nervous as she took her seat. A few new rules, Gladys. I like you. You do a fantastic job, and it would be tough to replace you. But if you keep sharing my personal business with Mom and Alicia, I might have to let you go. Do you understand? She looked quite unhappy, but nodded. That's not enough. I need you to say it clearly. I promise. What happens in the office stays in the office, and I won't interfere in your personal life again. Thank you, Gladys. Now catch me up on what I missed. She relaxed as we discussed work matters, addressing the little issues that had come up while I was gone. An hour later, she buzzed me. Reggie wants to see you when you have a moment. Reggie, the plant manager, was clearly eager to talk right away. He inquired about my vacation and offered me coffee, but he seemed more anxious than usual. Look, Al, I don't want to intrude, but which one talked to you? Mom? Alicia? Gladys? None of them. Hiram reached out about how upset everyone is. He paused, startled, when I stood up. Reggie, I like you, and I enjoy working here. This was my dream job, but I promised myself that if my personal and work lives ever mixed, I would quit both. Would 2 weeks be enough notice? If not, I could give you a month, but nothing more. I'll send you and HR an email once I'm back at my desk. Goodbye, Reggie. His eyes widened, and he stumbled over his words as I left. He called me back as soon as I reached my office, which I put on speakerphone while I sorted through my files, boxing up personal items. He went from pleading to demanding, and I laughed. What do you think you can threaten me with, Reggie? My job? That ship sailed half an hour ago. Push me and I'll go to corporate and ask them when an employee's personal life became a concern for a vice president. How do you think that would go over? He hung up. Gladys was tearful when I walked out at day's end. Then she began to apologize. You can stop, Gladys. I know you didn't mean any harm, and I'm not holding anything against you because I understand you thought you were acting in my best interest. But take this as a lesson. Think carefully before interfering in someone's life. I'll see you tomorrow. I knew my mom would be waiting for me, but it took her 2 hours to gather the courage to come over. She approached me cautiously. Her usual strong demeanor softened for a change. Hi, Mom, I said as I opened the door and gave her a friendly kiss on the cheek. Want some coffee? Tears began to fall even before it finished brewing. Did we mess everything up? Not exactly, but you certainly started things off on the wrong foot. Did you think I'd just go along with it? I keep forgetting you're just like your father, calm and agreeable until something clashes with your beliefs. None of us expected you to react like that. Poor Alicia is heartbroken. She hasn't worked all week because she can't stop crying. Do you still love her? Yes, but it seems she cares more about her pride than our relationship. Don't say that! She loves you completely. Right now, if you asked her to do something unusual at the altar, she would do it just to marry you. Interesting thought. Let me consider it. No, that doesn't appeal to me. Do you have anything else? Just this. The sudden slap made my ears ring and blurred my vision. If she leaves you, you'll have earned it. Start acting with your heart instead of your mind. Yes, we all got carried away, but I believe you showed us a reality check we won't forget. I care about you, son, but I don't like your actions right now. I was still trying to clear my eyes as she slammed the door, thinking I sided with her. At that moment, I didn't like her much either. 20 minutes later, I called Banty. I heard her intake of breath when she realized it was me. Come to my place, now, if you want to save this relationship. It took her about 15 minutes, and I could see her on the phone as she walked over, probably getting an update from Mom. Her hair looked tired, her eyes were dull, and her clothes seemed to hang loosely on her. I opened the door and realized I was fed up with seeing fear in a woman's eyes when they spoke to me. I pointed at the sofa while tears welled in her eyes as I settled into the recliner. "So, what have we learned from this situation, Alicia?" That hit her hard. I only used her full name for serious matters. "I don't know about you, but I've learned a lot in the last few days. I've learned about boundaries, and I need to understand mine better to prevent this from happening again. I didn't mean to push you away. My business approach doesn't translate well into personal matters. I took you for granted, and I won't let that happen again." She ran out of words, so I spoke. "Do you know what I learned? I've realized that I'm too accommodating when it comes to love. I want you to be happy, but not at the expense of my own feelings, especially when it comes to anger. I'm sorry if this took you by surprise, but did you think I would just accept everything? We need to communicate better or we won't last. I intend to spend my life with you." It was hard to express myself clearly, so I stopped trying. We didn't immediately rush into anything. Instead, we mostly cuddled and talked together. The topic of children came up, and I mentioned I'd like at least 2. She laughed. "I'm the youngest of 5. My mom is the third oldest of 7, and my dad has 4 brothers and 3 sisters. I don't think I want that many, but 4 seems nice." She moved in the next week, so we were pretty much a couple by the time the wedding happened. I returned to work after the executive vice president from the headquarters called. "I expect you back on Monday. I heard some details about what happened. I can assure you that your personal life will remain private from now on. You're the future, Al. Reggie is retiring in 2 years, and you are his replacement. I'm also giving you a 5% raise as a sign of my seriousness. Now get back to work." My relationship with Reggie didn't fully recover, but we managed to get along. Reggie had a nice farewell when he retired, and I was just settling into my new office when Gladys came in with a huge grin. I had promoted her and raised her salary due to her expanded responsibilities. I knew that expression by now. She had news. "Your wife is here. Should I send her in?" Just for fun, I should say to keep her out, but that wouldn't end well. I wasn't sure what to expect. If Banty wanted to see me, she usually came right in. When she walked in with both mothers, I felt a wave of concern. She smiled. "Relax, honey. It's good news, I hope. I just returned from the doctor. We're having a baby. In 7 months, you'll be holding your son or daughter, or maybe both. Twins run in the family." I was shocked. We'd been trying for a year and went for tests after 8 months. The doctor said, "Both of you are perfectly healthy. Alicia, if you were any more fertile, you could grow a garden. You just need to relax, and your first will come in no time." And now we were expecting twins. Both mothers were thrilled, and Addie cried tears of joy when we handed the babies to her. She could still have kids, but after her rough past, she was very careful with relationships. Banty took as much maternity leave as she could, and when it ended, she chose not to return. We could easily manage, and it worked out well. Whenever things felt overwhelming for her, one of the mothers would come over to help. One day, when the twins were almost 1, we ran into Juliet on the street. I was pushing the top-of-the-line double stroller that Mom had gifted us, and Banty was walking beside me, holding my arm. She looked at Banty, the little ones, and me, then broke down in tears, perhaps regretting missed chances. Banty asked who she was and offered a sad smile. "You snooze, you lose." I think she's realizing now that she might have made different choices, but it's too late for that. You're with me now, and that won't change. Mom still spent time with Juliet, doting on Tony and Mark. She would take them for weekends now and then, and they usually ended up at my house. If the weather was nice, we often went fishing. I continued to host their birthday parties after Juliet and I separated. As they grew older, they and their friends would stay overnight, often featuring a round of catfishing. Juliet would show up for the party, then leave as soon as it was done. She had new relationships, even marrying someone for a while, but that lasted about 18 months before it ended, and she seemed to stop looking for someone new. Though still based at home, I had received a promotion to regional manager, overseeing 4 facilities. The pay increase was significant, and we saved most of it while putting some into college funds. I had just received my first annual bonus for my new role, and it was a pleasant surprise. I planned a vacation for the first week of February, which included both Moms, Hiram, and Addie in Bermuda. We enjoyed the sun and sand, playing with the little ones on the beach, helping them build sandcastles and holding them while the warm waves washed over their feet. The moms stayed in while Banty, Addie, and I visited a couple of clubs. Banty had embraced motherhood and transformed her style, making her more confident. Adele was 31 by then, still fit and beautiful. She attracted attention, dancing with some guys while politely declining most offers. One fellow got a bit aggressive and wouldn't let go of her arm. I think the look on my face warned him it was not a good move, but he should have paid more attention to Banty. She, although petite, managed to get his attention in a very unexpected way. He went down quickly, and Banty and Addie shared hearty smiles. We left soon after, and he remained on the floor looking like he was out of luck. The lady surprised me the next day, leaving Hiram and me to watch the kids while they went shopping, dining, and spending time at the beach. They returned giggling, having forgotten sunscreen after their fun. The next day, they complained about sunburn. Since we had a bit of a private beach at our rental, the first thing they did after lunch was apply sunblock. They laughed at my expression when I told Hiram they still had it, and both mothers looked stunning. Banty initially frowned, but soon perked up, ready to join her friends. I had planned an overnight trip to one of the production facilities due to some production issues. The situation was due to management problems, which led me to stay an extra night to sort things out. I dismissed the assistant manager due to inappropriate actions and conversations with coworkers. Some employees had recorded evidence of his misconduct. After addressing the issues, I sent him away and prepared for my return home. I always called home daily, and that morning I went to leave a message for Banty about my arrival, but it went to voicemail. That didn't worry me too much, but I was surprised to see so many cars in my driveway. I had to park on the street, wondering if there was a surprise waiting for me. But then, Mom and Addie came out, their eyes red and full of tears. What happened was tragic and senseless. Mom took the kids shopping, giving Banty some time to herself. Banty decided to clean our new boat while she had the chance. It was early March, warm but a bit windy. Mom found Banty floating by the pier. She quickly pulled her ashore, but she knew it was too late. Despite calling 911 and performing CPR until they arrived, the EMTs were unable to save her. The cause of death was ruled drowning, complicated by a head injury from a fall. I barely remember all the details from that time. The funeral was crowded, Banty was well loved in the community, and I was known in business circles. Many attended to show their support, rather than for any other reason. She was 30 years old when she passed away. It was 2 weeks before I went back to work, and probably 3 months before I felt completely myself again, but management didn't mention anything. The vice president, who had always believed in me, encouraged me to see a counselor, offering to cover the cost. Addie helped me attend those sessions, and after 5 of them, I started to cope with everything. Both of our moms took turns caring for Johnny and Carol, and Adele came over every day. I eventually set up a bedroom for her since she stayed over 3 or 4 times a week to keep an eye on me and spend time with the kids. After nearly a year, I asked her if she was getting tired of us, and she surprised me by bursting into tears. Mom seemed a bit upset as well. 2 years later, I surprised Addie by telling her we were going to the Christmas dance at the country club. She looked unsure and asked if I wanted to go with someone else. The look on her face was priceless when I clarified that I wanted to take her. She was so overwhelmed that she ran to her bedroom and slammed the door. I sat on the couch, trying to understand where I went wrong, feeling quite miserable. The door creaked open and she walked out hesitantly, sitting beside me. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I've always admired you, Addie. You're one of the kindest people I know. You help friends and even strangers whenever you can. We've always cared for each other as friends. I think bad timing and my own doubts held us back." She smiled a little as she said, "Doubts? You've always been a little intimidating to me. Your intelligence and beauty made me feel unworthy. I thought I could never be the right person for you. But I finally mustered the courage to express my feelings. I loved my first wife. But now that she's gone, I see you as someone special. You're the only mother the kids have known, and they care for you deeply. I can't imagine my future without you. Would you consider being with me?" The moment she kissed me, I felt a rush of feelings. When she pulled away, she was smiling. "I think you're right. Here's my suggestion. Let me take the lead in our relationship. Yes, we'll go to the Christmas ball, and Grandma will take care of the kids that night. We won't be sleeping in separate rooms again. Got it? It's time for you to practice saying, yes, dear. Yes, dear, to see, great. Let's keep practicing. At some point, you will propose, right? Yes, dear. Soon? Yes, dear. One more thing before we wrap this up. We're not getting any younger. While we love the twins, I think we should have another child soon. Yes, dear. You're doing so well. Before I share the news with your mother, who has been waiting for this, I think it's time we practice a few more things. Agreed? Yes, dear. Mom was thrilled, and plans began right away. I was a bit nervous about Banty's parents, so I called her mother first. I could hear the joy in her voice. I already know, silly. We're happy for you, and this is what our daughter would have wanted, to see you with someone you love. Your mom and I are on top of everything, so don't worry. Since Addie's parents are no longer here, we decided to support her like family. I'll handle the arrangements for the wedding, and my husband will walk her down the aisle. Your kids will be the flower girl and ring bearer. Well, that was great. 2 of Banty's brothers would be groomsmen, and as I stood at the altar that May afternoon watching Addie walk down the aisle with our kids in front, I felt happier than ever. What made it even more special was the little bump under her dress. The doctor thought it might be twins. Hey, listeners! If you enjoyed watching this video and want to stay updated with our latest content, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss out on what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video with Queen Cheating Tales.